Hello, Lennon Bone. Welcome. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
You're nailing it. Yeah, you
Ah,
got it right
great.
on.
Hi, Lennon. How are you today?
I'm doing great. It's what time is it where you are?
It's
4 o'clock?
4:30 p.m.
Okay, yeah. So it's 9:30 a.m. for me, and
You're in the US and
I'm
I'm
in
in
the
Holland.
US. Yeah, I've been through I don't know what town you're in, but we went toured through the Netherlands and did some stuff and it was so fun. I got to go over there a few times and I just fell in love with that area and people were so kind. It was just a beautiful experience. And so now I really, you being a new mom, you'll relate to this. It's like you do things as a musician and then later you want to go back and experience it like with your family. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
oh, I
totally.
saw this really beautiful, cool place. Like now I want to do it with my family. And it's like that's a thing I'm hoping for before too long is getting back over there with my wife and kiddos.
You want to show them and tell them all your stories
Yeah.
of your
Maybe
travels.
not all of them. Once they get a little older, they'll hear
What
the
happens
rest
on
of them.
tour stays on tour, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today. There's a lot for us to cover. Um, I think I'm just going to start with introducing you for those of listeners who don't know you.
Probably all
Um,
of them. So that's perfect. Yeah.
well, they will after this podcast, so for sure. Um, You are the founder of Stop the Starving Artist, which is a platform that helps creative professionals turn their passion into a paycheck, basically, by building strong online communities. And you've been doing that very successfully. So you have helped your community get millions of views and thousands of people in their own communities, and more importantly, help them to finally start making an income or making more money with their art and selling their art through social media, basically.
Hmm.
Not to mention the fact that you share a lot of valuable insights on your own successful TikTok channel, Stop the Starving Artist, with more than 13,000 followers. Congrats, that's amazing.
Thanks. Yeah. It's kind of weird to think about. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, TikTok, how long have you been active on TikTok?
I think about a year and a half. And so I started it and had a lot of adverse reaction to it because it's like at the time people were still saying like, oh, it's just a bunch of like um people showing their cleavage or like
Oh,
dancing or whatever. Like those are the things that I heard is like, oh, it's if you're not showing off like body parts or like dancing, then you're not going to be successful. And I was like, I don't know. Like I feel like there's got to be like people. I'm a firm believer that people are people, and we put a lot of stock in platforms. And I do think there are cultural differences in platforms, but I'm just a big believer that if I get on TikTok, just like I get on Instagram, just like I get on YouTube, I still have the same interests. And so I kind of went with my gut instinct on that and was like, I'm just going to do this my way and talk to people directly and just see what happens. And it's been really amazing. I think the community there is really supportive and it just blew my mind. So really cool.
yeah, because 13K followers, that's not nothing. Um, and I think people are generally on social media for different reasons, for entertainment, to gain knowledge, as an escapism. And
Mm-hmm.
I think you're definitely ticking the knowledge and inspiration box for a lot of people.
Thank you. Yeah.
And so your target audience are creatives ranging from musicians to designers to visual artists and writers. So not just musicians, but you do have a background in music. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I am a drummer primarily. Like that was my um, sort of my entryway into music. And in the beginning, I was in, ironically, I was not a drummer. I played in what we call here, maybe you've heard of it. It's called DCI, which is Drum Corps International. It's like a big nerdy marching band sort of thing. And I'm sure there are drum corps from the Netherlands, or at least there used to be,
Mm-hmm.
that would come to the States for this like big thing. And I did that as a trumpet player, and then that I just kind of got this bug for touring and like performing, and it was just this really rigorous entry into kind of music as a performance thing. And I then got into a space where I like joined a band where I was playing with a couple guys that I went to high school with, and another guy that they had went to college with. So I have no college degree. I'm literally like sort of, walking that line of like school of hard knocks, baby. Like that's all I know, figuring it out as I go. And we ended up touring for about 10 years, and we're fortunate to have a couple of albums that charted here in the States a little bit. We had were able to be on television, and I got to work with a Grammy nominee through some of that, and like just do
Wow.
all these crazy things that a lot of people would be like, oh, you made it, and I just never felt like I made it. I don't know what it was. It was like one of those things where I was just constantly chasing the rabbit, and it just never felt like it felt like it was ego driven for me,
Mm.
and what I see now as we get older is like this position of how am I serving people, not just myself. And so that was kind of when I started to think about leaving, and I ended up leaving the group. I did production work for a while and started making I made a YouTube channel for musicians specifically, very similar to what you're doing, just talking about business and those kinds of things. And then I joined a company called Video Creators as a strategist. And that company, as a team, there was a team of 3 of us that were strategists, my boss, and then 2 of us under him. And we helped our clients grow their audiences by millions and their views by billions, all organically, no ads or anything, through this idea of personal branding and storytelling. And it was just like, oh, I want to do this with artists. And so I started talking about it and thinking about it, and was like, well, what does this look like? And at the time, my wife was going through postpartum depression, and she's an illustrator, and so she started doing these drawings kind of based around what she was going through, and wanted to really help other moms that were dealing with that as well. And I thought, maybe there's something here that we can play with that I'm learning from work. And so together we worked on kind of her branding and her messaging. And through that, she created kind of a little movement in her own community that grew her account to about 20,000 on Instagram. And she was putting these moms in these like little groups with one another, and it was this beautiful like community thing. And then she got cold called by Netflix family to like do some illustrations. She was in HuffPost and Bored Panda, and just had these things going really viral. And it was just this fascinating thing of like, okay. And then I had a bunch of our visual artist friends as well be like, this isn't just for musicians, this is for, I think, any of us. And so I had to get past my imposter syndrome and be like, okay, I'll try it, and I just kind of let my wife hold me accountable to like not overstep any boundaries on the things that I didn't know, because I'm not a fake it till you make it kind of guy. I'm very much like, let's be real about where we're at, So yeah, so that was kind of the impetus of the whole thing, and how it transitioned into what it is now, and became a much more open community of just artists and creatives doing all kinds of great, amazing work. Like I'm blown away at the people I get to work with every day.
That's amazing. And I think it sounds like what happened with your wife and the effect or the impact she had on other moms' lives and the community that came out of that kind of inspired you and made you see the power and the value of the internet, the positive sides of it, and how it
And
can.
I was totally seeing it at work, in my other job too, because I remember one of the first things I did is I went to this conference, and this was just before I got my job with this company. And it was a video conference. And this guy came up to me, and he's so sweet. He's like probably in his 60s. And, he's like, how are you? What do you do? And I'm telling him, and he's like, oh, that's amazing. And he just was like really feeding into me, like, here's like, this is great. I'm so excited about all this. And I go, well, what do you do? And he goes, I'm almost embarrassed to say it, but I made $1 million last year. And I was like, that's incredible. I'm just like blown away. And I asked him how, and he said, through YouTube. And I was like, you made $1 million through YouTube? And he said, yeah. So I asked him how, and he said that he does countertops. And so he would teach people how to lay countertop tile. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, because I'm not like, that's not what I do. But he sold on the back of that an epoxy that was natural, all natural epoxy, and blew it up. And then later on, he goes on to sell his YouTube channel for, I don't even know how much money. And then he got to stay there. And I started thinking about it, and I was like, man, artists in general are just behind, like, and it's not their fault. It's just like the way that things are now, there's so many angles that you can monetize from, that the potential is unlimited, and it feels exciting. But I had to just kind of play with all that. So that was kind of the beginning where I was like, it's the Wild West out here in the best way, and everybody's so supportive. And I was just blown away at, like, it didn't feel like it did in the early days where you're just like hustling it out. Like, everybody was there to help me, and they were walking me through things. And it was just such a cool community. And so that was kind of the beginning of me having my mind blown and say, like, what's the possibility here?
Of the aha moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of artists, you're like, oh, we're kind of behind on all of these things. I think a lot of them still maybe feel that they need mainstream success. They need the hits. They need viral content. You need to appeal to thousands of millions of people in order to have success as an artist, as a musician, with your music, and that it's only for the happy few. Because isn't that what we've always been told when we were younger? Like, yeah. Oh, you want to do music? Well, but do you have a plan B? Because we kind of think of artists as they often struggle, and it's hard to make it in music, etc. So, to artists who feel that they need that mainstream success, and they need to have viral content in order to build a successful career in music, what would you say to them? What's your take on that?
Rubbish. It's all rubbish, right? Like, you don't need virality. I think that there's two sides of it. One side, and I've heard you mention this before, one side is a belief that it's possible. You just have to believe that there are options. And you have to have a willingness to look outside of your industry. So I'm gonna pivot to, like, directly to musicians, where they think, many of them, that the only option for making income is through things like Spotify or touring. And so long as that's the only way you think about creating an income, that will be the only way that you can create an income. And, when you think about Patreon, for instance, which I don't mind it, but I'm not a huge proponent of it. Like, I prefer, like, build your own platform. Don't let someone else take a cut, like, that's me. But anyway, like, you can.
No, I agree. That's part of my philosophy also.
Yeah.
I do think it can be interesting for artists to build a community on Patreon, but my philosophy is, if you can do it yourself, why wouldn't you? So right. That you can always rely on yourself, grow your own muscle, build your own empire.
That's right. 1,000%. Yeah. And there are so many great ways that you can do that now, great platforms that you can use where it's literally like plug and play. Like, it's amazing, and just because you don't know that it exists doesn't mean that the option isn't there. So that's the first thing for me, is like, we have to understand that nothing was built without forward thinking. We have to see that there are other options. So I would encourage anybody, in the music industry to look outside the music industry. Look at people doing online business. Look at people doing membership models. Look at people that are doing selling digital products and say, what does this look like for me? And then what does this look like for my person? So I'll use a couple of artists as an example. I heard one artist who was a vocalist, amazing vocalist. I wish I could remember her name, but very much like a rock and roller, like this is my thing, you know, and also incredibly into fitness. And those two things were a big part of who she was, right? And we'll say it's a part of her brand. Now, when I say brand, I mean, what do people say about you when you're not in the room? That's my definition of brand, right? So what are people saying about you when you're not there? And so when they talked about her, it was likely like she's an incredible rock and roll, like touring musician who, and she's also into fitness. And like, I follow her kind of for both things, you know? And so she opened a membership around fitness for musicians. Like, brilliant. Like, why not? And what happens though, is that the old model says that's not cool. I'm not cool doing that. I'm not a quote unquote artist because I've treated myself like a business. And I think that's such bullshit. Like I think the highest thing you can do is serve people. And one of the best ways you can do that is by having a business. And so that was my biggest mind shift for myself, right? When I said like everything about touring was just about my ego. Who likes me? How many fans do we have? What is this? And when you stop making it about me and you start making it about we, everything changes. And so that's like my thing. And you can do that with, and I say this to all kinds of artists too. It's like if you had, I forget what it is. It's like it's the 1,000 true fans rule, right? Like if you have 1,000 people that'll pay $100 a year, like that's all you need, you know? But you could have a $400 product, like a membership for the entire year. And now you need a quarter of that. Like that's amazing. And it's not as hard as you think, right? It's just about most of it getting past that fear of what are people going to think of me when I do it this way? And that's not how it's been done in the past.
Yeah, I think a lot of artists in general, not just musicians, have, what's the word, like apprehension in regards to things such as self-promotion and business, because it sounds corporate and commercial. And like when I used to be in a rock band, like the worst thing people could call us was commercial, you know? But I think,
totally.
Yeah, I think creative people, and obviously this doesn't go for all of them, but for a lot of them, I think they get it wrong, you know. Business, I used to also think like, oh, business, it sounds cold and corporate and totally not creative to me. But a business is just a means to a goal, really. Because if you approach your music as a business, you get to serve more people. So It's not selfish. It's not about money, you know. It's a way, selling is serving. It's a way to serve people and give them something to enjoy. Like a friend of mine in music, she would tell me, oh, when I have new music out, I feel so bad about promoting it online. I'm like, why? Well, but because it feels so like, oh, look at me, I have a new song out. I'm like, okay, but do you get messages from fans? It's like, oh yeah, all the time. Like, okay, what do they tell you? Oh, that they love the song or that it helped them work through this or that. I'm like, that's why you're promoting it. And
that's right.
Then she was like, oh, I never really looked at it that way. So I think, and that's why I'm so passionate about helping, like you, we have a lot of similar ideas and philosophies. That's why I'm so passionate about, teaching artists to think as entrepreneurs, as creative entrepreneurs, and to get over those mental blocks. And talking about having to have commercial success or viral content, I think that 1,000 true fans theory that you mentioned is so vital. And I think that helps to take a bit of the pressure off also. Like, you don't have to create reels that reach tens of thousands of people or even hundreds of thousands of people. You just want to have to reach the right people.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
And your audience that resonates with what you do. So talking about communities, yeah, Stop the Starving Artists, your platform is all about helping artists build those communities. For those listening to whom it still may sound a little bit vague, when you talk about community, what do you mean by that? What does it look like?
Yeah. So this, and you mentioned this in one of your episodes about growing your audience. It's like okay, I'm gonna rewind and then I might come back to that. So yeah, let's define community. So community is something where we are actively engaged in a mutual effort, right? So we're trying to achieve something together. This is the way I see it. Or we have a similar belief system. There's a great book called Primal Branding, which we talked a lot at Video Creators at my previous job. And the author's name is Patrick Hanlon. And he says, the strongest communities don't form around a common interest, but a common belief. Right? So I love this idea because this is the reason that wars happen. This is the reason that churches have split into multiple denominations. This is the reason that, you know, we are cat people and dog people, you know, like it's such a beautiful and simple idea. And so when I think about building community as an artist, I think that there are three things that you think about to do that. The first is your belief. And the first thing that most artists want to do is go and say, well, like, what do I believe as an artist? I just want to encourage you to, for a second, like, as we think through these things, scrap the idea that you're an artist and just go to your person. I'm just a person, right? I'm just a person who's trying to reach people. If we just start there, like, that's the key to me, because everything that I teach is around this idea that you don't make art, you are the art. Everything you create is a vessel back to you, your story, your ideas, like where you come from, what you've been through. And so when you think of your art, quote unquote, your songs, your music, like, that's a calling card back to you, to your heart, to your like feelings, you know? And so if we start with you, that's the most valuable thing. So ask yourself, what do you believe in as a human being? So for me, I believe in that we all want to be seen and heard, and that everyone has the right to feel seen and heard. That's one of our core values as a company. I also believe in relationships over revenue. You know, these things will immediately make somebody go, oh, thank goodness, like somebody's thinking that way, right? It could be as simple as like all men are created equal, right? Like that's a very strong belief system. But the thing is for it to be a belief, there has to be a line drawn in the sand that says, I either am with you or I am against you. And it exists on like a whole, like deep end, shallow end idea. So one of the examples that I use is you could have the all men are created equal, like that's a belief, but you could also have a belief as simple as if you're trying to learn to draw, you should only ever use a pen, because a pencil only teaches you to erase your mistakes. Right? So there's sort of these two levels. And I just think that if we start there with what do I believe in? What gets me revved up and excited when I hear people talk about things? What pisses me off? You know, like those are great places to start. And then you can start to just write those down. And then you say, what's your story? As a person, not your artist story. We're not trying to craft this like beautiful thing that somebody over at Spin Magazine or, you know, Pitchfork's going to be excited. We're just like, let's just be human for a minute. What's your story that got you to that belief or those beliefs? Like, how did you end up there? What happened in your life? And then you ask yourself, what is the thing you're fighting against? What's your opponent? And so if my belief, like one of my beliefs, right, is that is against virality, especially as, or trends rather, as a tactic. I don't like tactics, because tactics feel very surface level. Because you're usually, if you're using a regular tactic or like a surface level tactic like trends or hashtags, you're not doing a thing that really matters, which is what am I trying to say? How do I be a good communicator? Like that's the real problem you're trying to solve, you know? And so I'll say that, like, you know, anybody that's telling you that like a tactic is what you should do, or you should go do trends, is only thinking about their own gain and your quick win. Like that's what I believe, you know? And so when I start there, like that lets somebody go, oh, he's different. And I like his view of these things. And so we don't usually think about these things as engaging, but what I'm talking about is what happens when we sit at a party for 30 minutes and we talk to one another. We find all these little beliefs and these things that we like about this person or we don't like, and we go, I'll never talk to you again, thank you for your time. Or can we like have coffee? This was great. And we've just figured out how to strategize that into like a social media idea, because I believe that the best way for you to create a sustainable art career is to connect people with the artist as much as the art.
Yeah, I think connection is a big thing, and
Yeah.
that it's not just a one-way street where your fans are there to listen to you and support you. Like I don't know if you know that, but I'm a vocalist in the trance music scene, which is really a niche in dance music, electronic dance music, but it's very alive all over the world, different countries. And there are all these they talking about hashtags. They have the hashtag trans family, and I've done my research into my own audience, and also being a fan of trance music myself, what I really love about it is that international component, that doesn't matter where you're from, how much money you have, what you look like. That's what we have in common, and we love to travel for the music and to explore the world, and yeah, have these quite like liberal ideas about the world, a certain worldview, I guess you could say, that kind of unites us. And I think if you can appeal to that feeling, I think then the community is more about that feeling and that shared, I was going to say interest, but in your philosophy it's not really even the interest. It's like you connect and you resonate with each other on a certain level.
It can start with an interest, but the real connection, like again, the stronger it gets, always boils down to the belief. So for you mentioned like liberal interests, liberal ideas. There's some lines in there, right, that are drawn that say like you're either with us or you're against us on these things, you know. And absolutely, like that's the heart of it. And what I love about this as an idea is that, again, these are like things that subconsciously happen. And I think that's what makes it so fun to talk about and explore, is that when we think about why do we like this thing? Why does this like get me excited? It's what my buddy Jeff Barch calls the thing under the thing, you know, like this coffee cup is just a coffee cup, right? But also it represents like an opportunity where I got to go hang out with my dad at this festival, and watch him play music at like 70 something years old, you know, and be able to spend time with my dad on the thing that we both love most, which is music, right? So it's like everything we do has those things. And I just think that's such a fun idea to explore. And if you want to talk about like using business and creativity, like you start digging into that world, it ain't nothing but creativity. And that feels really fun to me.
Someone once said, I don't remember who, but something along the lines of, it's your music that pulls people towards you. It's the community that makes them stay and makes them come back.
I love that.
And I think especially nowadays with the internet, it really doesn't matter what you're into. like mukbangs or whatever, you know,
Yeah.
ASMR, whatever. You can find a channel, you can find a creator that is also into that stuff. And then you find the community of people who, yeah, who maybe you feel like you belong to. Maybe you're from a small town and you have always felt a little bit like the outsider because of your interests. Well, on the internet, you will be able to find people who are similar to you and that you connect with and you resonate with. And I think that's also the strength. If you as an artist can offer that to people, then you
Yeah.
really have gold in your hands.
Yeah. Are you familiar with this Five Nights at Freddy's? Are you familiar with this?
No.
So it's like it's big in the US right now. There's a movie they made about it. I don't know much about it, but my kids know about it. And they'll be like, "Dad, can you play this song?" And I'm like, "Sure." And then I listen to it and I'm like, "Okay, this is pretty good. Like this is cool, like good pop music or whatever." Or there's like a Roblox, you know about Roblox?
Oh yes, yeah. I
Okay.
have a nephew who's into that.
Yes. And having a kiddo now, it's all going to come around. So with Roblox, there's a thing called Rainbow Friends, which is a game inside of Roblox. And they had some songs that they were listening to, and I was like, "Oh, this is actually really good," you know. I was like, "What's this all about?" And they're like, "Oh, this is all music by like for Rainbow Friends or for Five Nights at Freddy's." And I was like, "Really?" Like you would never know it, but it's exactly that it starts with the culture, like, oh, we're building this community around this thing that we all love. And now there's totally like younger musicians that are grabbing a hold of that and saying like, I'm already in this community, I'm going to make music for them. And I'm like, that's freaking brilliant, right? Because you've already found the thing that unites you and you're into it as well. So why not, you know? And it's good music. It's not like it's cheesy, you know. And if I listened to it, I would have never known. But those that know the language, they know. They're like, oh, no, that's about that character. Like you just don't hear it because you don't know, right? I
Yeah,
love
that
that.
also shows you that there's so much potential if you can find that message and that voice. Um, and that's something you often talk about as well, you know, telling your authentic story and having a message. I think we already kind of covered it, but why do you believe that that is so important for artists? Because I'm sure a lot of artists and musicians, and I've heard them say this, like, I don't want to become visible online. It's my music should speak for itself. You know, why do I have to share my story? And of course, you know, everyone has the right to decide how they want to build their
100%.
career. Um, but yeah, why do you believe that sharing your story, your authentic story, and having your getting your nailing your messaging is important
Yeah.
for artists?
Well, because I think of it as if we had a Venn diagram podcast style, one circle your art. And so let's say it's a song, and the song within that, like within the song, there's a story, there's an idea, there's a concept, you know, there's room for someone to interpret. And because I feel like that's the thing a lot of artists are afraid of, is they don't want to take away someone's interpretation. And so I totally respect that. And so if we keep that like in one circle, I think that's great. But then in the other circle, you just have you as a human being, which is what we outlined before, right? And so where those two things come together is where the magic happens. Because if you and I sat down and we talked about vocal compressors on the internet over and over, like who's going to give a shit about that besides like producers and musicians? And this is what a lot of musicians do, right? They're like, oh, I love this gear and I got this pedal and I got this thing and like here's how I made this. It's like, who's into that? Well, other musicians. But you're like missing the humanity of the thing that you do. And so that's why I think your story is so valuable, because that's the humanity. Like that's where it all comes from. And people think, well, I don't know if I want to tell the story of the song. Then don't, you know, like that's fine. Tell your story instead. Tell the premise of like what you were going through around it. Tell what your main like origin story is as an artist. Tell how you met your significant other. Like, why does this matter? Because it's relatable. And there's a great book called Storyworthy, and the author's name's Matthew Dix. And what I love about this guy, like I got to interview him once, and we were talking about it. He said, you know, when you think about your story, everybody wants it to, like, they think my story's boring. Nobody cares. And he said, I have a story where I literally get hurled out of the front windshield of a car and die. And then they bring me back to life. And people think that story's crazy. But the one that gets people to cry or gets people to laugh the most are the stories that where I'm just talking about being a dad. And I'm talking about these moments where I was hungry as a kid, and, you know, now I give my kid too much in their lunchbox because I don't want them to ever go hungry. And my wife calls me out on it, you know, and people are like, oh, that's me. You know, if I told you that my wife and I fight over doing the dishes, you might be like, well, my boyfriend and I don't like fight over doing the dishes, but we do fight over the laundry. Like, our brain just automatically creates this parallel. So the specificity allows someone to see their own story. And that's the power of storytelling. It's why we watch documentaries. It's why we're, you know, if you think about your favorite artists, I guarantee you know something about them outside of their music that makes you go, I just like them. That's why does everybody like freaking Dave Grohl? I just hear it all the time when I read the comments. It's like, he just seems like such a nice guy.
Yeah.
You know, he's just like real down to earth and, you know, whatever. It's like, that's what we're looking for. And now more than ever, I think that's what we're looking for in the artists that we follow.
That actually reminds me of an advice that I once got from someone who's had been around in music for a really long time. And at the time I took the advice, but later I realized that she actually gave me an advice that probably stems from like the old music industry, because she said I should work on, I don't remember the exact words, but becoming like a larger than life figure, and I shouldn't be too available for my fans. And of course, you know, if you are Taylor Swift, although I must say she has a pretty strong community.
And I think that she's as available as she can be for her fans.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. But maybe, you know, I think back in the day, artists were more unattainable because there was no internet. But now we have the internet. And I actually think that nowadays, to build a fan base, people want to be able to relate to you in some way. Of course, they also want to dream and have this, maybe with Taylor Swift, she creates a dream world, or I don't know, she's on top of my mind right now because of everything that happened this week with her concert. Like with glossy magazines, people buy those. They know it's all fake, but they kind of like the it's escapism for them, right? So yeah. I get that part, but I also think that online, you do want it to be a two-way street, and you do want to work on that relationship. And sure, if you're an artist who feels really, really strongly like, I don't want to be the face of my art, then that's your choice. But I do think then it will become harder to, make an income with your music. Then you have to find other ways to do so. I think, especially if we're talking social media, you, the artist, as you mentioned before, are very important to build that community, to build the relationship, to get the type of fans that are so into what you do and so feel so connected to what you do that they are willing to buy your tickets to your show and wear your merchandise and become a member of your paid subscription platform, things like that. Yeah. Those super fans that the 1000 True Fans theory also talks about. So yeah, I do believe also in storytelling and having a message. So I think for anyone listening right now, that would be a good place to start, right? To think about that. Yeah.
And I love that you brought up like the faceless artist, but I think about somebody even like Deadmau5, who, what an interesting character, where it's almost like we're getting to see two characters. And I kind of like that, where you get the artist side of things and then they pull back the curtain and we get the regular. There's something really interesting about that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the thing that I guarantee somebody's listening to this and they're like, well, so and so was discovered on whatever and like SoundCloud, and like, this is what I always get, the argument that I get. And I always say, if you think you're going to be the 1%, then do that, right? But let's be real and talk about like real tactics for real people in a real working industry. Like, the romanticizing the 1% is not doing anyone any favors. And so that's why I try to be very practical in the way that I think about these things.
Yeah, and also, what I come across often is that artists also maybe feel a little bit scared of becoming visible and being, so there's a reason that they feel apprehensive about becoming the face of their art. Whereas, especially when you build a community, it's about attracting people that are kind of similar to you, that you have shared interests with, and that's why I think also authentic, being your authentic self is important, so that you will attract the right people for you, and then you don't have to feel like scared, because it's like hanging out with your friends, right?
Yeah. Could we do a little exercise? Like, because
Sure.
I love this idea of we get wrapped up in the fear, and so anybody who's listening, I just want you to take a second and I want you to just close your eyes and think about, if you only had one person that you could interact with as an artist, that's all you get. Sorry, like, that's the new rule. We only get one. Who are they? Like, when you sit down with them, what are you guys just like jazzed to talk about? What questions are they asking you that get you excited to be with them? And what are you asking them that gets you excited to engage? And like, this is a person that you want to feel like, if I was driving a van, across like whatever country you're in, and I had this person with me, like, it would be a blast. Like, this person would admire you for the music and the art that you make, but you would also have this resounding like spirit connection that would be something completely different. And just write down all those things of like what it is that you guys would really resonate on, from movies to life experiences to beliefs and ideas. And those are great places to start with making your content. And to think that if you had one story that when you told it, somebody went, oh, that's exactly what I needed to hear. And I'm going to guess that you actually already have that story and you've already told it to a friend and they've gone, thank you. That's what I needed today. I think as artists, it is our responsibility to change the way people see things, to change their perspectives. And that can be done through a song. That can be done in the way you engage at a coffee shop. That can be done all kinds of different ways, including social media. And so why would you ever fear the idea of being around those kind of people? That sounds amazing to me.
Yeah, that's a good exercise. That's a really good one.
Thanks.
And talking about content, one would say that because of the internet, artists have been empowered. They have a direct way to communicate with their fan base. But what I'm noticing often with artists is that they actually kind of feel the opposite. They feel disempowered because of the content creation game, and they feel like it's taking away time from making their art, and they actually feel overwhelmed with all the different platforms. And, you know, sometimes they tell me it's like I can't just be a musician, I can't just be an artist, you know, I have to be an entrepreneur, and I have to be a video editor, and I have to do all these things. And you already gave some advice on how to come up with content ideas, but what would you say to artists who feel that overwhelm where it comes to social media? And do you see that often with the artists that you work with, also in the other arts?
All the time. Yeah. I'll start with a little tough love, right? Like, and you can totally resonate with this. You know, when I first started, well, let's start with like our options. Okay. You can do this IRL, in real life, right? And if you're going to do it in real life, you have to be booking shows. You have to be a driver of a van. You have to be good at packing shit. You have to be good at understanding your gear. You have to be good at communicating with people so you can make sure the front of house guy doesn't like make you sound like
creating business cards.
Creating business cards, selling merch, coming up with merch designs. Like, you know, whether you do it online or you do it in real life, and in some ways you'll do both, the thing that you have to understand is that these skills are very transferable from, again, social media to online. So what I think you and I are talking about is that social media is not this place where you have to be creating these incredible music videos and really highly produced things and whatever. All you really need to be is a good communicator. And that's it, right? Like, that's kind of like the nuts and bolts of it. So just seeing that there's going to be work to be done. And the professional does every part of the job, and the amateur only does the fun parts. Like, that's the first like thing we have to reconcile with in any industry. And artists are notorious for saying, well, oh, it's just me. Listen to me. You have to invest less than anyone else that starts a business. Anyone goes and buys, like, starts a restaurant, they are hundreds of thousands of dollars deep before they even
have to go to the bank.
Yeah. Like, before they even set a plate of food in front of somebody for them to try it. Like, that's risk, you know? And so I think we just need to be reminded that what a gift. You know, I can remember the days when we were out on the road and we had played 150 dates a year, and every night we would be in front of maybe 10 people. And I was like, oh, this is a nightmare. And now I can go on TikTok and almost be guaranteed 200. Like, you're kidding me. You know, this is such an insane change that we just need to start with gratitude for what's available and at our disposal now. And then once we can like just see the possibility, there's two questions that my coach used to ask me whenever things would feel overwhelming. Because overwhelm usually comes from a place of not knowing where the end is, right? So you need to have the end in mind. So ask yourself, like, if you're engaging in social media and with your people every day, a little bit, and you're just spending, let's say 30 minutes to an hour, at most an hour. I spend 30 minutes making a post, posting it every day. Like, I'm not on there all the time, you know? If that's what you're doing, then what does that look like for you? How are you engaging with them? You know, what do you see? What makes it fun? What are the exciting parts of it? Because we have to work toward the goal, not the obstacle. You know, my kids read a book where it's like, I forget exactly how it goes, but essentially it's like, if someone says to you, don't look at the elephant, don't look at the elephant, don't look at the elephant, what do we look at? The elephant, right? And so that's what we're doing to ourselves, is we're looking at the obstacle like, oh, I've got to do this thing. I feel obligated. Obligation is a breeding ground for resentment. So you have to take away the obligation and see it as opportunity. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I definitely believe in what you say. You know, look at the possibilities. The glass is half full, not half empty. I do think there's this element of perfectionism also, what you pointed out already, that I know that, like, for example, Instagram used the big influencers. There was a period where it was all about creating these almost magazine-like feeds. Whereas nowadays, it's actually the most raw footage that works the best. People want to feel like you are their friend and you're in your living room, basically just on the phone with them almost. So I think a lot of the time we overthink things, and I still do that myself.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
I will create a reel with all these different shots and videos and stuff and different angles, and I'm like, wow, this one is really good. And then it's almost crickets. And then when I put up the simplest reel ever that took me like 5 minutes, maybe less, and that one goes viral, or viral. That one goes
Viral for
viral,
you.
viral
Yeah.
for me. Yeah, or gets really good interaction. So it's almost sometimes as if, and if you're a perfectionist, then you can relate. I don't know if you are, but I consider myself a recovering perfectionist. It's almost like if it's easy, it can be good. This
That's
strange
right.
idea.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think for artists who do feel overwhelmed with the content creation game, keep it simple. Try to keep it simple and know that you don't need a perfectly curated Instagram account, for example. And just start somewhere, start with
Yeah.
the first step and figure it out as you go. The first time I created a reel, it took me the whole afternoon because I was just figuring it out. But the more you do it, the faster your process will become. And it's also you need to leave room for trial and error. I think we're often also in a rush and things have to happen today or yesterday, preferably. Whereas it takes these things can take time, but it doesn't mean that you're not on the right track. Like you said at the
Yeah.
beginning, we throw in the towel at the first hurdle, like, oh, you see, this is not for me, this is not gonna work. Whereas there's such a big opportunity there. There's this, I don't know if you've ever seen it, this drawing of this guy in underground tunnel, and he's carving out the tunnel,
Yeah.
looking for gold or diamonds or whatever. And from the outside, if you're as a spectator, you can see that he's almost there.
Yeah.
He's almost, like, maybe 2 more times and he's reached the diamonds, but he's giving up. So you never know when you're at that point that you're almost there where you want to go, and to look at things as a journey also, not to be too focused on the outcome, but also enjoy the process and the learning process, and approach things with a growth mindset is something I believe very strongly in. So I can definitely relate to or resonate with what you're saying, that it's such a beautiful opportunity we have, and we should feel empowered and not like
Yeah. I
disempowered.
mean, so we do challenges like every third month in our community, in the like a social media growth challenge. And it's not based around views. It's based around, am I putting out intentional content that talks to my person, that feels like it resonates for me,
Mhm.
right? And because then we're just learning how to communicate better, how to be better communicators of our message and our story and our ideas. So it's not about the views. We do use views as like metrics to say like what ideas are resonating.
Yeah,
But
of course.
the thing that I think about and I try to teach all the time is that most of us, we want one post, like every post is like life or death. Like, oh, I hope this goes big. But are you actually ready for it to go big? Like, do you really have everything in place that if that thing went big, and this happened to a guy in our community last week, he had one of his posts, he kind of skipped a little bit on like what we were doing and started doing some trendy stuff. One of them gets like 6 million views, but very little engagement, very little connection.
Not the right
And
audience.
yeah. And so you're just like, okay, like let's remember that what we're building is like a web, and so when you have all these posts that really resonate with your person and tell your story and show your music and your art and show like who you are and what's valuable for them, you know, and that's a whole other conversation, like what value is. Then when that one post hits and they go back, now you like hit it, right? Like that's what you're trying to build, is something where you can catch somebody when that thing hits. You're not trying to build one post that goes huge, because most of the time 20% of all your posts will be responsible for the most views, but those others are responsible for what gets people to connect.
Yeah, there's a big distinction between the vanity metrics, right, and the people that are actually invested in you and your content, and that resonate with what you do. So we shouldn't be too focused on the amount of followers we have. It's about reaching the right audience. Well, time is flying by so fast. So we're gonna move a little bit towards wrapping this up.
Okay.
But you mentioned already like your community and artists that you work with. Through Stop the Starving Artist, you offer multiple different programs, various different programs that help artists build their own community and start making an income or make more money from their art, basically start monetizing their art. Can you tell us a little bit more about those programs that you offer and how people can work with you?
Yeah, so we have sort of 3 different levels. So the first level is about building that community and finding your people. And that's in what we call Creative Impact Academy. And this is basically a go at your own pace experience where you have a course that walks you through everything that we've talked about today. And at the time of recording this, it's just $19 a month. If you DM'd me and said like, hey, you know, I heard you on the podcast, like I'm happy to give you a discount to like try it out for a week. We usually do like, here, take it for $1 and then see what you think. Because I don't want anybody to do anything that they're not actually excited about, right? And then we have what we call Design Your Creative Career, which is the full like sales process. And that's a 12-week program. And then of course I do one-on-one stuff as well. And that's not cheap, because for every one-on-one client I take, it takes away from the community we're trying to build. And, you know, ultimately my vision is not to do a lot of one-on-one, because I'm so in love with building community and culture. Like that's my favorite thing.
So using a community would be your preferred way of teaching.
1,000%. Yeah. And then keeping one-on-one very exclusive, you know. So those are kind of our big ways. But if you're just in this position, like, well, you know, put your money where your mouth is, Lennon, like, then one thing we do is if you're in a position where we've talked a lot about social media, you're not feeling good about it, you're like, I don't know what's wrong, could you give me a rundown of like what you see that we could fix? We do free social media audits. So go to stopthestarvingartist.com and you'll see a thing at the top where you can fill that out. And if your application gets reviewed and we feel like you're a great fit, then I'll do an audit myself or someone on the team. And then we'll give you some very practical advice. And then you can choose to like come hang with us or not. Because again, like I want first to serve, because I feel like that's the most valuable thing that I can do. So we're focusing a lot on things that aren't scalable, you know, and it's challenging, but it's truly how I want artists to see like, okay, it really is about service, and I want to honor that.
And they can go to the website stopthestarvingartist.com if they are interested in an audit. That sounds great. What I also wanted to ask is, lost my train of thought.
That's okay. Yeah.
Always happens right at the end, you know.
That's right. That's okay.
Yeah. No, but that's great. All the different ways that people can work with you, kind of also depending on where they are in their journey, and maybe also depending on their budget. And on social media, where can people find you?
Same. Stop the Starving Artist. So we have a very poorly kept podcast that I'm trying to get back on to, hopefully in December, because I don't like waiting till January, because that makes me feel like, oh, this is a resolution.
Oh, yeah.
At it, you know? So I'm like, no, I'll do
No
it
one
earlier.
ever
That
sticks
way.
to their New Year's resolutions.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm like, well, then this isn't a New Year's resolution. This is just a thing I'm doing. So trying to get back on that. Stop the Starving Artist on Instagram. Stop the Starving Artist on TikTok. There's videos on YouTube, and we're starting to do more on that realm too. So it's a little bit everywhere, but most active on TikTok.
I myself really enjoyed going through your TikTok content. So I highly recommend anyone listening who feels
Awesome.
inspired by this conversation to also check you out there. And you also mentioned a couple books during this conversation. It would be, I'm going to put your links in the show notes, but maybe it would be great to, I don't remember from the top of my head. Maybe you don't even remember which one you mentioned, but we can.
I have 3 right now that I would totally recommend for any artist struggling with mindset, growing your thing, and like, thinking of it as a business.
Yeah, I would love to put those in the show notes as well, and maybe even get a copy for myself to read them. Always love a good book. To wrap it up, final question. What is one thing that listeners who are listening to this right now feel inspired by what you've just shared? What is one thing they can do starting today to start building, or today to start building their online community? What would you say? Okay, start here. If there's only one thing you can do today, do this.
Yeah. So this is a really challenging question. I thought about this because you sent me this one and I was like, oh, that's a hard one. Because it's so like there's so many variables. So I'm going to put this back on the listener. And this is an exercise we do a lot with people who are like, well, where do I start? So I call this the red line idea. So I want you to go and take all the things that we've talked about that you're like, these are all the things I feel like I should be doing. And I feel really overwhelmed, blah, blah, blah. Like all those things we've talked about, list every single one of them. Set a timer for 15 minutes. Okay. And then I want you to number them from 1 to however many. Let's just number like the first 10, let's say. And the number 1 is the thing that if you asked yourself, if I do this, it will get me much closer to my goal and potentially wipe out 2 or 3 of these other things. Like I won't even need to do those if I did this thing. And so once you have those top 10, take the top 3, and those are the things you focus on. Mm-hmm. Because we instinctually know what we should be doing. We may not know how, but you know what you should be focusing on. And a lot of times you're telling yourself like, I should be doing this, but I'm not yet. And so you have to ask yourself like, how do I start doing the thing I know I should be doing, but I'm not doing yet? And I think that that's a great place to start, is to have 3 things that you're focusing on. The others don't go away. You just now have a list of stuff to go back to. And you can go, once you get number 3 done, you can bring number 4 in, and so you're constantly sort of rotating these 3 focal points. That has been a game changer for me in the way that I approach anything I'm working on, is to only have 3 things at a time that I'm really thinking about. Because man, the worst thing we do is get busy and we're not productive. And then if you need help with the how, pay somebody to help you. Like, I'm not kidding. That is the gift that keeps on giving, is like going directly to the source. And you may not feel like you're worth it, but again, go back to the restaurant analogy. Like anybody else that's building a business does not have the luxury of not investing in their business.
Yeah, for some reason, artists often think that they can build their business without any investments.
Or all alone. You can't do it alone.
Yeah, no,
you
exactly.
Can't. Yeah, whether it's friends or what, you just need support. You need support.
And there's a lot of resources, like free resources out there, but that takes a lot of like reverse engineering what other people did. And it's all these little snippets. But if you are like, okay, this is what I need to focus on, I need help with that, then look for someone who can help you with that. I really believe in that too. I myself have done that multiple times, and it's still benefiting me today.
And I think you and I both would agree that it's not about hiring us. Like if you had something and you're like, hey, I need help finding somebody, you message me. I'll help you find somebody that can help you with that. That's not me. Like, doesn't need to be me, doesn't need to be us. You just need help. That's just
Yeah, it's about finding the right person also for
That's
you and on the subject that you need help with. And to as a final thought, I love that lists. I like to call it impact or income producing activities. You know, those are often the ones we kind of procrastinate on, or let me first just redo the bio on my website. You know, that's the easy stuff, and we kind of avoid the things that are actually going to help us. And I think talking about overwhelm, I think it often comes from the fact that we keep postponing the things that are actually going to make a difference, because I guarantee you won't feel bad about working hard and having to do a lot of things if it gets you results. But if you're working hard on a lot of things and the needle isn't moving, then that can leave you feeling stressed out and overwhelmed. So I think that's also a really important thing to remember. Like, to always think, not just say yes to everything, but think about, okay, first I'm going to tackle the impact and income producing activities that are on my list to reduce the overwhelm, and work on your community, right? That's a biggie.
That's right.
It's one of those impact producing activities, and in the long run, also income producing activities. So, Lennon, thank you so much for this conversation. It was a pleasure to have you on the show. I feel inspired, and I'm sure the listeners of the BCFA podcast will feel the same. So I'm going to wish you a beautiful day, because where you are, your day is just starting. And don't be a stranger. I'll be following you on your TikTok account.
Thank you. And I just want to say what a gift you are to the industry at large, and hearing the way you're like presenting your ideas and what you're putting out there. I am such a believer that we need more people that are implanting artists with a positive mindset. And so you are an absolute treasure to all these people that are listening right now, and so many more to come. And so thanks for doing the hard work. Yeah.
Thank you. Sometimes I need to hear that.
Yeah, we all do, right?
Yeah, yeah. And you're here with the same mission. So I think that's a good feeling to know that I'm not the only one out here.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Lennon.
My pleasure.